We talk a lot about reincarnation on this channel, and as you know, we know reincarnation has to do with purely logical and rational structures and mechanism, having nothing to do with any kind of woo-woo mysticism or faith or karma or anything like that. But today we're going to look at the universe as a whole as we ask the question, does the universe itself reincarnate? And if so, why and how? In addition to that, we're going to be looking at this idea in light of Nietzsche's idea of the eternal recurrence. We've been looking a lot about Nietzsche's philosophy. Last week we talked about the will to power. Today we're going to take a look at the eternal recurrence and what it has to do with a universe that continually reincarnates. It's going to be a good stream. I'm really looking forward to it. And one last thing that I want to remind you guys is that if you enjoy my work, please consider supporting on Patreon, because you'll get access to our weekly secret live streams, our hidden Discord server, The Citadel, a lot of my hidden notes, and a lot more. You get all that on Patreon or tier 2 or higher on YouTube. So let's get started. So Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence. The idea of eternal recurrence or eternal return has existed in various forms since antiquity. Put simply, it's the theory that existence recurs in an infinite cycle as energy and matter transform over time. In ancient Greeks, the Stoics believed that the universe went through repeating stages of transformation similar to those found in the Wheel of Time of Hinduism and Buddhism. So Stoicism was an excellent Hellenistic philosophy, and Stoicism basically said that the earth and reality in the world was born in fire and then ultimately will be consumed in fire. You had this sort of ancient idea of even the Big Bang, and then this cycle would continue of being born in fire and consumed in fire. They thought of reality as almost like the phoenix that would be, consumed in fire and then born again from the ashes. So we're looking at this idea of, does the universe reincarnate? Because as we know, if you're not familiar, in Hyperianism, reincarnation plays a very important part in Hyperianism. And sometimes we even refer to transmigration or establishing a monadic link or something like that, because I want to make it very clear that usually when people think in terms of reincarnation, they think in terms of karma or morality or being a good person or some kind of ethical mechanism. I want to make it very clear off the bat, if you are new, that in Hyperianism, karma, morality, ethics does not play any part in the reincarnative process. No part. What reincarnation has to do with is evolution. It's also not any kind of mystical or woo-woo concept. It's mathematical and rational. So real quick, as a quick summary, we are all eternal monadic minds, which are systems of mathematical frequency that are constantly evolving and trying to optimize themselves. So basically what happens is you have monadic minds that exist in the non-local frequency domain, which is the realm of mind. What they do is that they localize themselves by linking to an avatar, a body. And this constitutes incarnating into the physical world. Now, why? Because through this body, they are able to learn, grow, explore, and this is what leads to the evolution and optimization of you as a monadic mind. Your internal frequency components optimize as you learn, grow, and explore the world. And, this process continues, and it's a completely rational mathematical concept. It has nothing to do with morality or faith or anything of that nature. It's mental evolution coupled with linking to a physical world to drive that mental evolution. So the idea here, though, is what we're talking about today is, does the universe reincarnate? And if so, why and how, etc. And the answer is that yes, the universe does reincarnate. Now, it's actually a little bit wrong to say the universe reincarnates. It's really the absolute or the source that incarnates, because the universe is actually the physical aspect of reality. The universe is the material aspect of reality. So you could say that the universe is the avatar of reality. So just like our avatars don't reincarnate, It's our minds that reincarnate. Truly, the universe doesn't actually reincarnate. The universe is the avatar. So it is the mind, the universal mind, that incarnates and is associated with the universe. So how does this actually work? Now, it's not that the universe has no mind apart from us. We as a collective are the universal mind. We as a collective are the absolute. And if you're wondering, so we have different concepts here. Let me just parse them out real quick. If you're new, there's the source, there's the holos, and then there's the absolute. The source is the domain of frequency, the domain of mind. The holos is the physical universe, the domain of space and time. You can think of the source like the mind and the holos, or the universe, like the body. The absolute is both. It's all reality. It's the source and the holos. It would be the mind and the body. So you have the source, which is like the mind. You have the holos, which is like the body. But it's the universal mind and the universe as the physical universe of space-time. Then you have the absolute, which is everything, both together. Just like you have a mind and an avatar, or you can think of a person as that composite mind avatar system. So, but again, the idea is not that there is a separate mind from us, some God mind that is apart from us. It is that is what we are. So we are each individual monadic minds, and we're all eternal. Now, when you consider us together as a collective, as a network, that is the collective mind. Now, that is what is associated with linking to the universe. So basically what happens, and we've talked about this before, is that what happens is prior to the Big Bang, we existed in a state of complete and total harmony. It was a realm of perfect mind. Before the Big Bang, it was a realm of pure mind. There was no physical universe. No physical universe had been generated. So imagine existing as a pure mind with no physicality. And this is because we were in perfect harmony with one another. And from a mathematical perspective, this entails our individual frequency components having perfect symmetry, meaning that all of the constituent waveforms expressed orthogonality. Now, once you introduce non-orthogonal phase relations into waveforms, you start to generate things like extension, which will generate the material world. And you can see this in Fourier transforms. Once you start introducing non-orthogonal phase relations into the basis waves, you start to generate, you start to go from, let's say, a delta function, which is, 0, to something that starts to have extension. So what this means, without the mathematical jargon, is that when we were in a state of pure mind, when that state went from perfect harmony to out of harmony, or in other words, when it went from unity to what we might say fragmentation, this is what generates the physical world. This is what started off and kicked off the Big Bang. So the Big Bang was this, and you can kind of intuitively understand that. Think of something that's in perfect harmony. It's like in so much harmony that distance and extension itself vanishes. But once separation starts to occur, that's when we get something like a localized universe. In other words, here I am over here, and you are over there, 5 feet from me. There's separation between us. When there's perfect harmony, there is no longer a world of separation. So prior to the Big Bang, we were in a world of non-separation, pure unity. Again, mathematically, once non-orthogonal phase relationships were introduced, this is, expressing thoughts that are independent of the collective will. Then we start getting separation. Then we start getting division. Now, this is not necessarily a good or bad thing. It's just what occurs. And so this is how the universe gets generated. So to put it in a nutshell, because I really want to get to this article, because I have this very bad habit of just going on these rants or whatever you want to call them, and then not getting to what we're supposed to read today. So, but to put things into perspective, this is the Big Bang. And then we go through this process, you know, there's billions of years of evolution, bodies evolve, avatars evolve, monadic minds link to these bodies, and, you know, progress occurs. We start gaining self-awareness, we start building civilizations, we start building societies, we start working together in more and more harmony. We eventually form sub-network minds, and then we don't even require to be linked to physicality anymore. Then we most likely start interacting with other sub-network minds. And then, long story short, through, you know, a process of exponential evolutionary growth, we ultimately reach what we call the final cause, or the omega point, which is when everything returns to perfect harmony and perfect symmetry, and we return to a state of pure mind. Then, once we have achieved that, we will, once again, generate another Big Bang. And this process continues again and again, of generating a physical world, that physical world collapsing back into a pure singularity of pure mind, that mind generating another Big Bang, another universe, and then that universe once again after a process. And this continues, you get it. It goes on and on and on. So we can think of this as like the universe reincarnating, just like we have incarnate into a body, learn, grow, and explore. And then when our avatars pass away, we link to a new avatar. As above, so below. The same sort of process is happening on a universal scale. And the universe itself will go away, collapse into a singularity, and then another one will be born. And the collective mind, which is all of us together, links to that. And because it's generated from us, so it's intrinsically linked to it, we can't not be linked to it. We just automatically are, because it is an extension of us. It's generated from us. It's our projection. So we can't not be linked to it. Just like we have, just like a hypotenuse cannot not be linked to its adjacent and opposite sides, the two legs of the triangle. Like you just cannot separate the two. They're intrinsically, logically, rationally linked together. They go together. They're just different ways of looking at it. But you can see how if you were to take the hypotenuse, if we look at it at a unit circle, at certain points, those legs vanish. And that is like the singularity collapsing back into a state of pure mind. But then you keep going again, and then the legs return. And this is how we can kind of intuitively, but in a very real way, that is actually how it works. It's just exponentially more complicated than that, how physicality ends up getting generated from mentality. And so you have this cycle of universal births and deaths. But the mind aspect is eternal. It always is. Just like, again, if we're looking at that radius or hypotenuse, whatever you want to call it, on the unit circle, that radius will always be, but sometimes it's associated with legs, sometimes it is not, depending on where it is in that process. So we have this idea of a constantly reincarnating universe, and that's us as a collective. Now, we've described how this happens. I mean, in a very, very simplistic way. If you want to know in detail, I've written a book about this called Ontological Mathematics: The Science of the Future, which goes into detail on this process and much more in the process of our system in general. If you're just joining us, there's a lot more to it. I'm not going to be able to explain it in 5-10 minutes. It would take a long time. But anyway, that's a quick summary. But what essentially is going on here is we want to ask why. Why does this occur? Well, in a formal sense, we can just say, well, it's the next step in a mathematical process. It has to occur. But what about from the content side? What about from the subjective side? Well, the idea here is that to fully express itself, it needs to experience itself in its diversity. So what I mean by that is that we are reality. When we generate a physical world and incarnate into it, we are exploring our own transformations. We are exploring our different permutations. And so what we do when we generate this physical world is that we're exploring ourselves in our various transformations. Now, do you think when one universal cycle is over that we've exhausted all our possible transformations? Not at all. Of course not. There are still many, many, many more to experience, and we will continue to experience ourselves in our various transformations. It's kind of like if you have a Rubik's Cube, and let's say you solve the Rubik's Cube, well, there's still, even if you've solved it once, there are still many different types of transformations of that cube that you can experience. There's not just one way to do it. So the universe is experiencing itself in which we are experiencing ourselves in our vast multiplicity of different transformations, our permutations, our diversity, and because this is us. When we walk around this physical world, this is us that we're exploring. We're exploring ourselves. Just like when you go to sleep and dream, you're exploring your dream world, which is you exploring your own mind, because your dream world is a product of your mind. But every time you go to sleep and dream, you're experiencing something completely new. Well, same thing when you're, wandering around today, you're experiencing yourself as ourself, as the absolute. Because remember, we are both one and many at the same time. We are one mind formed by many minds. We are one mind that has particularized itself into a vast multiplicity that then localizes itself in space and time to be able to experience its transformation. So do you see how it works? We have one mind that is the universal, and it wants to experience particularity, and so it particularizes itself as individual monadic minds. And so, okay, well, now it experiences particularity, but to go even further than that, it wants to experience locality, which means it doesn't just want to experience uniqueness, because that's what happens. When you have a universal that particularizes itself, you have a one that's now experienced itself as many and unique. So it's now experiencing uniqueness, but that's not enough. It also wants to experience localization, as in separateness, as in having extension, as in being able to explore its internal dream world. And this is how we get the physical world. And from the content side of things, there are many different ways to interpret the experience of that. But ultimately, in essence, what it is us as one/many experiencing our various transformations, our various diversities, our various permutations. When I experience you, if I go have a cup of coffee with you, I am experiencing myself in a very specific way, from a very special perspective. And as we all experiencing ourselves and have interactions with each other, we're all experiencing each other, which is us, in extremely unique ways and viewpoints. And so, again, as above, so below, know thyself. The whole process of reality is the universe knowing itself. And it will do this through various cosmic cycles as it experiences different permutations and different transformations of itself. So, but let me actually read this thing, okay? But anyway, we can think of the Big Bang, the Big Bang singularity and everything, sort of being like the embryo of the universe. It's the early stages of the universe is sort of like the fetus of the universe. But remember, it's us as a collective. So Nietzsche, we're going to talk about, because Nietzsche had a very intuitive idea that kind of touched on this subject in a certain way. But we'll see how it goes here. So ideas of cyclical time, because remember, we just talked about how Stoicism and Hinduism and Buddhism hint at this idea of a cyclical reality, like the Stoics saying that the world is born in fire and then will be consumed in fire and then born once again. Highly recommend looking into Stoicism, by the way. Very awesome Hellenistic school of thought. So such ideas of cyclical time fell out of fashion, especially in the West, with the rise of Christianity. Well, man, I know we have to read this, but there's so much I want to talk about. One thing that I really want to talk to you guys about too is just always keep in mind, I think it's very, very cool to look at the dichotomy between the East and the West. So you have the East and the West, and the East is very intuitive and deals with unity, and West is very logical and rational and deals with linearity and separateness. And remember, I am generalizing a lot here. I'm sure that there are some thinkers in the East that had ideas more dealing with logic and reason and separation, and there are probably some Western thinkers that dealt more in unity. So I'm generalizing, but overall, it applies pretty well. You have the Eastern ideas that deal with unity and intuition, and then you have the Western ideas that deal with linearity and logic and reason and separation. And it's extremely interesting to think about because it almost reflects how the functions of the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of the brain develop. The right hemisphere of the brain is associated with things like intuition, and it's more associated with the frequency domain and the realm of unity and art and music and things of that nature, whereas the left side of the brain is associated with logic, reason, mathematics, language, etc. So it's interesting to see that, and we can understand why with the West, when they would apply logic and reason to the world, you would have this sort of linear, piecewise understanding of reality, because what reason does in its early stages is it breaks up the world into pieces and categories. It likes to categorize things. It likes to say, like, oh, this is a cup, and that thing over there is a table, and this is a cat, and this is a dog. Here is the genus, here is the species. It likes to set everything up, break things up into individual separate boxes and categories. And this is, obviously this is very arbitrary. What separates a cat from a dog, say, are just arbitrary rules that humans invented. But that's what it does. It breaks things up into individuality and separateness. And then on the other hand, you have intuition, which is connected to the unitary whole frequency domain. So it thinks of things in terms of wholes. And that's why you have interesting philosophies such as Advaita Vedanta in Hinduism that talks about Brahman, how it is the one true reality and that we are all Atman that must realize that it's Brahman, and talks about things in wholes. Now, the downside is that in Eastern thought, doesn't really follow logic and reason that well. It's mostly dealt in intuition, but you can see why. It's because intuition leads you to wholes and unities. And then the West is more focused on the logic and reason side of it, which deals with pieces and separation. However, what the great philosopher Hegel brought forward is he showed that reason doesn't actually separate things necessarily, that it is only a misunderstanding of what reason is. So Hegel delineated between what he called the understanding and reason, because Kant kind of popularized the word understanding, which is what most people would have associated with reason, being the part of your thought that thinks, organizes, and categorizes. And so what Hegel basically said is that no, reason doesn't necessarily separate things and put things into boxes. It can, practical reason can, but true reason deals in wholes and unification. And so it's important to understand that even though we had this development, this dichotomy of sort of intuition and wholeness on the other hand, on one hand, and reason and logic and separateness on the other, that what ultimately happens is that reason can be used when it's properly developed to unite the two together into a whole, into a synthesis where it uses the best of both, where we're understanding, and the way it uses the best of both is that we're understanding through logic and reason, but we're also whole and united, but we're not but we can understand it rationally rather than just relying on pure intuition, which can often go very, very, very astray. So we have this idea here where we can unite the two together, the ideas of the East and the West, just like we can unite the left and the right hemispheres of the brain, like in the mirror self when we have them integrated and working properly, but it must be guided by logic and reason. And this was done extremely well in Hegel's philosophy, in his phenomenology of spirit and the science of logic, the science of nature, and the science of spirit was done very, very well. So that was a huge aside and diversion, but hopefully you found it interesting, because I find it fascinating. That could have been a whole live stream. Maybe we'll do a whole live stream on that at some point. But we're talking about the eternal recurrence. But again, it's just interesting to see how we have this as above, so below principle, which it's not an exact one-to-one ratio or an exact correspondence, but you can see, thinking in terms of generalizations, it's very, very interesting. We have a human that develops, say, a right hemisphere and left hemisphere of the brain that exhibits this dichotomy, and then you have the Earth that develops civilizations and cultures that have this sort of Western and Eastern mentality that interestingly reflect that. So, and we must unify, just like we want the left and right hemisphere of the brain operating rationally, we want ideas of unity and wholeness operating logically and rationally, so that we can understand all of reality and not just have a fractured piece of it. So logic and reason is that which ultimately unites all together. That's not to discount intuition. It's just intuition must be guided by logic and reason. So that's important. Anyway, let's actually talk about what we're supposed to be talking about. One notable exception, because we're talking about how a cyclical universe fell out of popularity. One notable exception is found in the work of Friedrich Nietzsche, a 19th century German thinker who was known for his unconventional approach to philosophy. One of Nietzsche's most famous ideas is that of eternal recurrence, which appears in the penultimate section of his book, The Gay Science. So The Gay Science is one of Nietzsche's most personal works, collecting not only his philosophical reflections, but also a number of poems, aphorisms, and songs. The idea of eternal recurrence, which Nietzsche presents as a sort of thought experiment, appears in aphorism 341, The Greatest Weight. So here's a quote by Nietzsche. What if some day or night a demon were to steal after you into your loneliest loneliness and say to you, this life as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more, and there will be nothing new in it. But every pain and every joy and every thought and sigh and everything unutterably small or great in your life will have to return to you, all in the same succession and sequence. Even this spider and this moonlight between the trees and even this moment and I myself. The eternal hourglass of existence is turned upside down again and again, and you with it, speck of dust. Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or have you experienced a tremendous moment when you would have answered him, you are a god, and never have I heard anything more divine? If this thought gained possession of you, it would change you as you are, or perhaps crush you. The question in each and everything, do you desire this once more, and innumerable times more, would lie upon your actions as the greatest weight, or how well disposed would you have to become to yourself and to life? So here's the interesting thing about this. So Nietzsche is saying, what if this demon came to you and told you that you have to exist, that you have to relive the same life over and over and over and over and over again, exactly the same. Now, it's a little unclear as if Nietzsche was just doing, because Nietzsche talks about this again, or references it in The Will to Power. So whether it was simply a thought experiment or he believed this would actually occur is a little up for debate. However, what Nietzsche is describing here is a situation where you live the same life again and again and again. So that brings up the question in Hyperianism and what ontological mathematics shows, is every universal cycle exactly the same as the previous one? And the answer is no. So it is not like how Nietzsche conceptualizes itself. Does the universe repeat? Will you have more lives in another universe? Yes, but they will not be the same. Just like we can complete a Rubik's Cube, but there are many different ways to complete it. There are many different transformations and permutations of reality. Reality the next cosmic cycle is not going to be exactly the same as this one. It's going to be much different. So the fact that we have different universal cycles does not mean they're going to be exactly the same. They're going to be different. And that's, thankfully they will, because that would be quite boring if they were all the same. But that being said, right, so that being said, with the knowledge that what Nietzsche says isn't entirely correct, that reality will repeat, but each universal cycle will not be the same as the previous one. Each one will be different from the previous. But the question is, can we learn something from what Nietzsche is saying? Because there's something very powerful in this thought experiment that goes beyond just this idea of a recurring universe. And what Nietzsche is saying here is, if a demon came to you and said, you have to live this life that you're living right now again and again and again, would you throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and be in despair? Or would you view it as the greatest truth, the most happiest truth ever said to you? In other words, would you find it a torment that you would have to live this life over and over again? Or would you rejoice that you would live this life over and over again? And what Nietzsche is saying, because he says this right here, if you knew that you had to repeat this life over and over again, this would lie upon your actions as the greatest weight. So yeah, see, the question in each and everything, if you thought that you had to live your life again and again the exact same way, if you knew that, then every time you would do something, that would weigh on you. And you would ask yourself, well, do I desire this once more and innumerable times more? So what Nietzsche is basically saying, and what this means here, is that it's a way to look at your life, in that you should try to live the best, most interesting life possible, such that you would think it would be amazing to live it over again and again and again, rather than living this really banal, boring, complacent, standard, average life. Because most people do. Most people live this very standard, average, basic, complacent life. They never really try anything new. They never step outside of their comfort zone. And Nietzsche's basically saying, someone like that, it would be hell for them to have to live their life over and over again. So what you should do is live your life and make choices so that if you did have to live them over and over again, it would be amazing, because you had this awesome, adventurous, fulfilling, magnificent life. And that is an excellent thing to take away from this thought experiment. And even though we aren't going to live the same life over and over, this is very powerful. And we can apply it to the fact that even though we aren't going to live the same life over and over again, we are eternal beings. So you are experiencing a particular moment right now in life, and have fun. And I don't mean have fun by just, play video games and watch Netflix. I'm saying, really start to live with that idea that you are the master of your fate. You are the author of your own story, and you are in this for eternity. So many people live life as though it's just something that they have to get through. And then when it's done, then I'll be in heaven, or then I'll be, whatever. No, start living your life, really experiencing it, really making the most of it, living it as an adventure, with that knowledge that, and this entails, we talked about the triadic perspective in Hyperianism. This entails having the monadic perspective, because in the avatar perspective, it's just, you have one life in this avatar. That's the avataric perspective. You have one life in this avatar. And that can be helpful sometimes, because finitude can give meaning to certain things. But when you, and that's good to have that avataric perspective at times, but then you can pull back and switch to the monadic perspective when you realize that you as a monad are eternal. And then you can make choices with that knowledge in mind to really have a fulfilling and interesting life, and even plan for next lives. Live a life now where you're actualizing yourself and realizing that development that you are accruing will carry over. And so it's about living your life in such a way with the knowledge that you shouldn't be this, sort of banal background character, but really start. Because when else are you going to do it? You have now, and I mean, yes, you will have a next life, is what I'm saying. I know that you know that, but what, in the next life, are you also going to be like, oh, well, it's the next life, I'll do it, or in the life after that? It's like, no, start living now. You've already existed for eternity, is my point. My point is that you have already existed for eternity. You are eternal. So start living now, because you are eternal, and there's no other time to do it. You have now. It's a little bit of a complex concept for most people to grasp, because they're so used to thinking in terms of the avatar or finite perspective. But when you pull back into the infinite monadic perspective, you're eternal. So live. Have this an extremely rewarding, adventurous life. Now, don't be dumb. Don't, go out and hurt yourself or take stupid risks. I'm not saying that. Be safe, okay? But what I mean is really have a fulfilling life and take steps to do that. Now, so Nietzsche's philosophy is concerned with questions about freedom, action, and will. In presenting the idea of eternal recurrence, he asks us not to take the idea as truth, but to ask us what we would do if the idea were true. See, that's a really important part. What would you do? How would you live your life if you knew that you had to live it over and over again? You would want to make sure that was an amazing life, because you wouldn't want to do something banal and boring for eternity. He assumes that our first reaction would be utter despair. The human condition is tragic. Life contains much suffering. The thought that one must relive it an infinite number of times seems terrible. But then he imagines a different reaction. Suppose we would welcome the news, embrace it as something that we desire. That, says Nietzsche, would be the ultimate expression of a life-affirming attitude to want this life, with all its pain and frustration again and again. This thought connects with the dominant theme of Book 4 of The Gay Science, which is the importance of being a yay-sayer, a life affirmer, and of embracing amor fati, love of one's fate. This is also how the idea is presented in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Zarathustra's being able to embrace the eternal recurrence is the ultimate expression for his love of life and his desire to remain faithful to the earth. Perhaps this would be the response of the Übermensch or overman, who Zarathustra anticipates as a higher kind of human being. The contrast here is with religions like Christianity, which see this world as inferior, this life as mere preparation for a better life in paradise. Eternal recurrence thus offers a notion of immortality counter to the one proposed by Christianity. And that's another extremely important thing, is that we are life affirmers. We don't deny this life. We aren't escapists. We aren't like Buddhists that are trying to detach and reach nirvana. We aren't like Christianity's like religion where we're trying to reach heaven. And we even aren't like a lot of New Age systems where, they just want to return to the source. We are gods. Gods do not run away. Gods create and gods transform. What we want to do is transform ourselves, transform the world, and transform the universe. This world is our place and our playground and our canvas to paint, create, and transform. And this is what it means to be a life affirmer and a yay-sayer rather than a life denier. So this is also, we understand this in terms of Gnosticism, where in Sethian Gnosticism, they were very much opposed to the material world. they related the material world as hell and they just wanted to escape. However, in a different type of Gnosticism, in the Gospel of Thomas, it's saying that the kingdom of heaven is all around you right here and right now. You just have to see it. And Hyperianism agrees with this latter interpretation. We disagree with Sethian Gnosticism. We agree with the interpretation in the Gospel of Thomas, where our kingdom is right here and right now. We just have to see it and claim it. It is all around us. It has been taken from us. It has been stolen from us by the rich elite, but it is here right now for us to claim and create. And we are life affirmers. We are gods. We are not escapists. We are transformers. We are creators. And this world is our creation. And now it is up to us to create. And of course, once we reach a certain level of evolution and form a subnetwork mind, we won't rely on the physical world anymore, but we'll be able to create that alternate frequency domain where we are still creating, but now we're creating with full control over frequency patterns, and we'll be able to generate our own personal dream worlds. So we'll be creating in that aspect. So we aren't those trying to run away or detach. We are here to transform, create, actualize, and express, not to diminish, but to maximize. And that is exactly what we are here to do. And that is exactly why we are here to spread information and transform the world. So does the universe reincarnate? Yes, it does. And it reincarnates as us, through us. We are that incarnation. Why does it do so? It does so to actualize itself, explore itself in its various transformations, and be able to create and learn through its creations and experience itself in its diversity through us. That is what we are doing. It's the fulfillment of itself. It doesn't just want to be a seed. It wants to bloom and grow into something beautiful. And then at the end, it will die, but it will drop seeds again to grow into something new and beautiful in that perpetual cycle. As above, so below. You can learn a lot by looking at the life cycle of a plant. We are all reflections of that, and the universe itself is as well. We go from that singularity, bloom into something beautiful, and then ultimately drop seeds to do it once again. And will it be exactly the same as the previous? No, it will be wildly different than the previous iteration of the universal life. So we don't have to worry about Nietzsche's eternal recurrence where, oh, we're going to live the exact same life as the one we did previously. However, we can learn a lot from that thought experiment of Nietzsche's by learning how to really maximize our lives with that idea of, and another way to think about it as well that I really like is in terms of writing a story. Are you going to write, think of your life as writing a story. Are you going to write an exciting story that's going to be a bestseller? And what I mean by that is an interesting story that everyone would read? Or are you going to write a story that is a book that no one would buy because it would just be like, oh, so-and-so got up today, went to work, came home, watched TV, and went to bed. And it was just that every single day. You wouldn't even want to read that book. That's a terribly boring book. So be the author of the story of your life and create a masterpiece. And that's what Hyperianism is all about. It's about bringing out the actualization and potential in everyone, because everyone has the potential to bloom into something beautiful and magnificent. So let's fucking do it. And Hyperianism isn't just talk. It transcends philosophy. It transcends religion. It transcends science. It is the culmination of all these different things. So these aren't just things that we talk about. We do them. So do it. Transform your life. Spread this information so others will too. So we can have this magnificent, vibrant world of people expressing themselves and creating and being able to explore each other and see each other's art and creations and, gain knowledge with each other and grow together instead of this dull, boring, banal life where everyone is this dead clone robot. Everyone is exactly the same and are just factory workers in a mind-numbing planet where the only goal is to increase the riches of those at the top. Absolute bullshit. So let's learn from this, and not just learn, but apply it. Transform yourself. Be the best version of yourself. Live a vibrant life. And let's spread those seeds of knowledge across the world so everyone will start to do so as well. And we can create a beautiful life, a beautiful world where we're excited. Can you imagine if instead of, because think about it, you know, everyone just, they want to, you know, they just want to get out. What if it was so beautiful here? Imagine being a mind and being like, oh man, I can't wait to incarnate on Earth. That's a fantastic experience. It can be that way. It doesn't have to be this hellish thing where, I just want to get out. I just want to get out. I just want to get out. We can transform the Earth. And that's what we want to do as we build our unconquerable citadel on the hill, New Terra, into a place where we are excited to experience. That's not impossible. That's how it should be. And that is how it will be. I want to give a big shout out to all our top supporters on Patreon, all our supporters on Patreon, especially Cassidy, Alana, Renaissance Fairy, Michael, and Alan. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for your support. If you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon. It's the best way to support my work because of all the crazy deplatforming and censorship on Facebook and YouTube. You can even see Facebook and YouTube, they don't really like it when I talk about Nietzsche, so it's a pain in the butt. Patreon makes sure that I can continue to create. You'll get access to our weekly secret live streams, our hidden Discord server, The Citadel, and a lot of my hidden lecture notes. And that's for any tier of support on Patreon, or tier 2 or higher on YouTube. But once again, Patreon is the best way, and the link, pops up over here. So thank you so much, my friends, and I really appreciate it.